Alright, so we've made some good progress with our real-world SaaS app, but there is one major concern. When users generate these plushy images, it can take about 30 seconds or a minute for this generation to complete. So what happens when the user actually closes the browser or refresh the page and decide to just start a new generation? What happened with that previous run? And how would we know if that execution actually failed because of some technical error? Now, debugging these types of issues can be a real pain. You basically have to go and dig through some server logs that could be hours, days, if not weeks old. Ideally, what needs to happen is those generations need to run in the background in a safe environment that's also observable, so we can see exactly what's going on. So in this video, we'll add Inngest to our application. This will take our app from being a POC or a toy app way closer to being production ready. So as with everything else in this series, Inngest is open source. So you don't have to pay a thing. You can definitely self-host this platform yourself. And I'm not sponsored by any of these platforms. These are just tools that I ended up using in my actual applications. In fact, let me show you what this looks like by showing you another app that I built. So this app works very similar to the one that we're building in this tutorial. You upload an image, so it could be an image of any room, and then we can choose a prompt to make changes to this room. Now let's fire off generate. So while this image is generating, we can actually go over to Inngest and we can see this new run. If we expand this, we can see all the individual steps within this run, including the image generation. We can add all sorts of steps to these executions. And of course, we can decide to log whatever we want in the output of each step. If any of these steps failed, they will clearly be marked in red, and we'll be able to view the logs to see exactly what went wrong in that step. After we resolve the issue, or maybe it was just a temporary issue like the network was down, we could click on rerun to restart this entire process. Now, Inngest comes with a lot of very cool bells and whistles. Firstly, it's very easy to implement into Next.js applications, but I do want to show you some other really cool features. If we go to Ingest functions and flow control, we can see a lot of really cool features offered by Inngest, like concurrency control, and we can use this to determine how many of these functions should be allowed to run in parallel. So we might want to reserve resources for certain heavy processes. We can also easily implement things like rate limiting, debouncing, and under errors and retries, we can also tell Inngest to automatically retry runs if they had to fail. Right, so now let's have a look at implementing this into our app. Unless you're vibe coding, I highly recommend reading the documentation to understand exactly what libraries and functionality you're adding to your app. So in the documentation, I'm definitely interested in this Next.js Getting Started article because we are using Next.js in our app. So I'm actually going to copy all of this text, and back in our project, under docs, I'll simply create a new subfolder called Inngest. And in there, let's create a new file and let's call this Next.js Getting Started.md. And let's paste in everything that we just copied. Then what I'm also interested in is this install the SDK page. So I'm going to again copy all of this and add it to our documents as well. Alright, so I think that's good enough for now actually. Now of course you could use MCP servers like Context 7 to get the agent to retrieve the up-to-date documentation itself. And we will do that in this video as well. But the reason I like manually capturing the documentation is because some of those MCP servers are not available in Claude Code Web, and the online search tool is not all that reliable either. Some web pages do not allow the agent to scrape its content. So this is just a really convenient way to pull the documentation into the project structure so the agent can access it from anywhere. Alright, so let's pull up Claude Code, let's go into planning mode, and let's say, hey there, please create an implementation plan for adding Inngest to our application. Currently, when a user generates an image, that function is running in the background without any observability. So what we want to do is use Inngest to monitor these image generations. So when the user clicks on generate, it should create a new run in Inngest. And that run will be responsible for generating the actual image in the background. Please also consider things like rate limiting, concurrency, and implement retries. I've added Inngest documentation to the docs folder. Also feel free to use other tools like web search or context7 to retrieve up-to-date documentation for adding Inngest to this project. Alright, so I'm just going to clean up some of these typos because Inngest actually contains two N's. Okay, so Claude is asking us a few clarifying questions, like when should credits be deducted from the user's account? So I actually like option 3. We will reserve the credit as soon as the user clicks generate, but will only deduct on success. If the generation fails, the credit actually won't be deducted. Let's go with that option. How should the user be notified when the generation is complete? So we could simply poll the status of the generation every few seconds, or we could get real-time updates with server-sent events, or something like an email notification. I'll just go with option 1. What should happen to a failed generation in the database? So we could keep the record with a failed status, or we could keep and just hide it from the gallery, or delete automatically. So I think I'll just go with option 1. Let's just be transparent, otherwise our users might wonder what's going on. How many generations should a user be able to run simultaneously? So 1 generation at a time, 3 to 5 concurrent generations, or unlimited. I think let's go with option 2. Alright, let's submit our answers, and we'll see what Claude Code comes up with. Alright, so let's have a look at this implementation plan. I'm actually just going to go through all of this and make sure that I am happy with this plan. So I do want to note a few things. We actually have to create 2 new environment variables, so we must not forget to do that. Right, so I can also see that we're going to make database changes, which involves extending the user table with another field to store the reserved credits. And then we're also going to extend the plushie generation table with a failure reason field, a processing started at field, and the ingest run ID. Now, I actually don't like this failure reason field. Instead, I would prefer if we just have a status field, and we'll actually be able to view the failures within Inngest itself. So I'm just going to say, let's go back to planning. I'll just paste in that text and say, for the plushie generations table, wouldn't it make more sense to store the actual status of the run? We will be able to view the failures within Inngest itself against the runs. So we'll be able to debug it that way. But I think in the plushie generation table, we just need a status field. All right, let's send this. So really, at this point, don't be afraid to have a back and forth conversation with Claude and to ask any clarifying questions. If you're uncertain about something, ask Claude Code to give you different options. All right, so apparently we already have a status field, so we actually don't need this field. So the reason Claude wanted to store the failure reason text was because it wanted to show it to the user. But that actually won't make sense because for the most part, those failures will be technical and it wouldn't make any sense to the user. So instead, we'll just show some very simple text. So I'll just go with option 1. Which is this thing over here. No error messages stored. In fact, this made Claude reconsider the reserved credits field as well. While we actually don't have to reserve the credits in a dedicated field, we'll simply count the amount of processing generations. So with all that said, let's go into edit mode and let's select the create feature command. So what this will do is create a new subfolder within this specs folder. In fact, we can see it over here. It's called Inngest background jobs. And within a second, Claude will create a requirements document and a detailed implementation plan. And while this is running, I will really appreciate it if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more Claude Code content. Also, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Are you using Claude Code or have you switched over to something else, like Cursor's Compose 1 model? Or have you tried GPT 5.1? Let me know. Alright, cool. So we've got our implementation plan and our requirements document. This implementation plan is split into phases with actionable tasks per phase. This is really useful for keeping track of our progress. So now that we've got this implementation plan, what we can do is clear the chat and finally start with the implementation. All we have to do is grab this folder, and of course we could ask Claude to try and implement everything in one go, but the most important rule with agentic coding is to keep the context window as lean as possible. So instead of overwhelming the agent with asking it to implement everything, we'll implement this in smaller chunks. So let's say Please implement phase 1 to phase 3 in the implementation plan. Once you're done, mark the tasks as complete in the implementation plan. That looks cool to me. Let's send it. And we can see as Claude is working through the solution, it's setting these tasks as complete. And phase 3 is complete as well. Alright, we're now ready to move on to phase 4. So really all I'm going to do is clear the chat, pull in this specs folder and say, hey, please go ahead and implement phase 4 to phase 6 of the implementation plan. Once you're done, mark the tasks as complete in the implementation plan. And I'll keep going through this process until all the phases have been completed. I'll see you then. Alright, so Claude Code just went through everything. So it's implemented all of the phases, and all that's left now is to set up our production environment. We'll get back to this step after we've tested this in dev. So what I like to do is to clear the conversation, and then for the last time, pull in that same feature folder. So we've implemented all of the phases in this implementation plan. Your job is to review the solution to ensure that it's following good coding practices, that's in line with Inngest's best practices as well. You can use the documentation in the Inngest folder along with tools like the Context 7 MCP tool to retrieve up-to-date documentation for setting up and using Inngest. Please also resolve any issues that you find. Cool, let's send this. Alright, so Claude finished the code review and everything looks good. Now before we test our app, we do need to start the Inngest dev server. So what we can do is open up a new terminal session, and to start the server, we can actually go to the Inngest docs under local development. We can go to Inngest dev server, and from here we can simply copy this command. So let's run this command. Let's install the Inngest CLI. And now we can access Inngest from this URL. Cool, so that's really it. We can go to apps where we can see all the functions that's available in our application. So we've actually got two. We've got generate plushie and generate plushie failure. And on the runs, we can see all the completed and in progress runs. Of course, at the moment, we don't have any. So then let's go back to our app. I'm just going to refresh. Let's go to generate. Then let's generate this plushie. It says the execution has started, and if we go to Inngest, we can indeed see our current run. So we can see all the individual steps like uploading the original image, analyzing the image, and then we can also see that this finalization step actually failed with an error. So let's actually go ahead and cancel the step, and in the logs we get some message saying output too large. So I'm actually going to clear my Claude Code conversation, and for context, I'm going to pull in our spec folder, and let's say, alright, so we just implemented Inngest into our application. I tried to generate an image, and I can see the run in Inngest, but unfortunately one of the steps failed. And this is the error message that I can see in the actual step. So I'll just copy this, paste it into the chat, and actually we can go to the Inngest session as well and copy all of this stuff with the error messages. Then let's say, please use online sources as well as the Context 7 MCP server to assist you in troubleshooting this issue. Think hard. Okay, so apparently the problem was we were trying to send the original image to the Inngest payloads themselves, and they do have a file size limit. So Claude made a simple change to rather reference the file in blob storage instead, which it should have done from the beginning. So let's try to run this again, and let's switch over to Inngest. We can see our process is running, and look at that, this time the execution phase completed. So everything seems green. If we go back to our app, we can see the plushie was generated. Awesome. And if we go to gallery, we can see the plushie that we just generated. Now, because that previous execution failed, this one still says processing, although it was cancelled in Inngest. So I'll ask Claude Code to also update the status in our app if we end up cancelling that run. Thank you, this solution worked. I noticed though that although the previous run failed for that generation, when I go to gallery, that image is still showing processing. So the run is cancelled in Inngest, but it's showing processing in our application. Is there a way to set the status as failed in our application, or to sync it with the Inngest status somehow? Right, so while Claude is working on this, I'm just manually going to delete this entry because any new changes that we implement now won't fix this specific entry. So in the database, we can go to plushie generations and let's select this one in processing state and whack it. All right, cool. All right, so let's test this again. I just fired off a new generation and I can see the generation completed in Inngest. And we can see our image in the gallery. Cool. So another benefit of using something like Inngest now is users can start as many generations as they want. So while that one is running, let's immediately send another one. And in the gallery, we've got 2 images generated at the same time, and we can see both jobs running in Inngest. So this one completed and that one's still running. And back in Inngest, we'll just wait for this one to complete. Alright, now all of these runs are complete. And there we go. Now we can see all of our images in the app. Of course, we can keep chatting to Claude Code to add things like retries and concurrency. But as an MVP, I think this is good enough to deploy to production. Let's actually do that now. I'm going to run the command check build. This will simply check our solution for any syntax errors. Again, this is a custom command that is included with this free boilerplate. Right, we don't have any build errors, so the next thing we have to do is add all of these changes to a commit. Now we can simply create the commit ourselves or call the checkpoint command. This will simply add all of these files to a commit with a detailed comment. And finally, let's click on sync changes. This will push our changes to production. So if we switch over to Vercel, where our project is deployed, you'll see that the project is currently building. Now, while the project is being deployed to production, let's set up Inngest Cloud. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, Inngest is open source, so you can definitely self-host it yourself. But for an MVP, I'm simply going to use their cloud platform. Their hobby plan is free and includes up to 5,000 executions, which is more than enough for this MVP. So let's sign up. And I'm going to create a new organization. Let's call this Plushify AI. Let's create the org. Then let's go to apps. Then in the top right, click on sync new app. So I'll simply go to sync manually. And this will give us this ingest signing key. If you remember, in the implementation plan, Claude told us that for production, we have to create 2 environment variables, the ingest event key and the ingest signing key. So what we'll do is on our Vercel project, let's go to settings, let's go to environment variables, and let's add our ingest signing key. Then let's copy this key and then add it to this value field and press save. I'll actually select redeploy and redeploy. Alright, so for the app URL, we have to provide the URL to our production app with /API and /ingest. So of course, we'll simply copy our domain, then we'll add /API/ingest. Then let's click on sync app. Alright, so it looks like everything was successful. We can see our generate plushie function and all of these different functions. So if we go to runs, we don't have anything at the moment. So let's actually open up the production version of our app and try this out. Alright, I actually don't have any credits in production and we haven't implemented the payment functionality yet. So for the time being, what I'm going to do is go to my Plushify database in production. Let's open this in Neon. And let's go to our tables and I'll change the credits to 20 credits for my user profile. Right, so if we refresh the app, we now have 20 credits. Okay, let's try this. So I'll upload this image, let's generate this plushie, and we get this error saying that we couldn't send this event because we couldn't find the event key. And that is because we forgot to add this ingest event key. Silly me, this was actually mentioned in the documentation as well. Let's go back to our project, let's go to settings, environment variables, let's add ingest event key, and to get the value of the key, what we can do is go to ingest. So under production, click on this little key icon. Then click on event keys. Then let's create a new key. I'll call this production. Let's copy the key and I'll add it to this value field and click on save. And then let's click on redeploy. Let's grab this image and let's try to generate. So if we go back to ingest, we can see our new run. How cool is that? Alright, so my execution initially failed, And really all I had to do was go to any of these failed steps, and I copied this error and I passed it to Claude Code. And it turned out the issue was with my Open Router API key. I actually removed my key from production after recording that initial video. So all I did was I created a new key, I updated the environment variables, and I then clicked on rerun to restart this process. And it just completed now, so everything looks okay. I can see the generation in my gallery. How cool is that? Now we have a fantastic solution for seeing all these executions running in the background, and we can then restart them or view exactly what went wrong if any of these steps had to fail. Did you find this video useful? Let me know down in the comments. Also remember to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next one.